Welcome to the Air Force Podcast. I'm TSgt Josh Rosales. Before Congressman Sam Johnson, a representative from Texas, entered political office, he served 29 years in the U.S. Air Force. As a fighter pilot, he did everything from co-authoring the Air Tactics Manual at the Air Force Fighter Weapons School to soaring with the Thunderbirds and even flying combat missions during the Korean and Vietnam War. After his aircraft was shot down over North Vietnam, Johnson was held as a prisoner of war for nearly 7 years. After retiring from the Air Force in 1979, he was elected to the Texas House of Representatives in 1984 and assumed his current office as the U.S. Representative for Texas's 3rd Congressional District in 1991. In January of 2017, Johnson announced he would not run for re-election in 2018. On this episode of the Air Force Podcast, we talked to Representative Johnson about his legendary Air Force career and his thoughts on the Air Force today as he prepares to leave his seat in Congress.
The Air Force Podcast.
Thank you for joining us today, sir. To start off, can you just tell me what it was like going through ROTC during World War II?
Well, we had an armory in the basement of the high school, and every male student was mandatory ROTC. And, we had summer camp out at Fort Walters in Texas, and we were out there 2 summers while I was in school. And they taught us boxing. We had to get in the boxing ring with another guy, and taught us to shoot rifles. And
So they taught y'all to shoot, was that live ammunition?
Not there. Yes, it was too. Yeah, it was.
Well, it's kind of a different time. You kind of don't see high schools with live ammunition too much now, right?
Well, it was at we had a gunnery range in the basement of the high school too.
Oh, wow.
When the war started, it became mandatory for every male student at high school in Dallas to be in ROTC. And so I was Company J commander. That tells you how many we had. And we kept rifles and ammunition in the basement of the high school.
How many, were in your company?
Probably, it was normal size, so it was around 100.
Wow. So do you think that kind of helped you out, kind of set you up for success with leadership?
I think so, yeah.
After high school, you went to SMU, to Southern Methodist University?
Yeah.
Did you continue to do ROTC there?
Yes, I did.
How was that?
Well, it was good. It was Air Force ROTC, and that triggered me to get in the Air Force, obviously. But ROTC was kind of mandatory at that time.
And that was during the war, correct?
Yes.
And the Korean War broke out while you were still at SMU. Your ROTC class was actually activated?
Yes. Actually, they activated all the ROTC guys that were eligible, old enough, in other words. And I decided I wanted to go to flying school, applied and got it. And that's how I got to flying school. 2 of us from SMU went to flying school together, and that's where I met Buzz Aldrin, too, in flying school. In fact, he and I were students of the same instructor.
That's awesome, sir. What was it like knowing Buzz, going through flight school with him?
Well, no different than anybody else. It just, at that point in life, he had already decided he was wanting to go to the moon, and
He decided that early on?
He decided it early on, yeah.
Is it kind of like how you decided to be a fighter pilot? Like that were you dead set on being a fighter pilot, or was bombers a question?
No, fighters. We had no idea of being in a bomber. We were both wanting to be in fighters, so we went through flying school, 3 different bases where we trained to be to fly fighters, and then went to Korea, and we're flying F-86s over there.
You also knew John Glenn. How was that? Did you fly with him?
Yeah. John Glenn was a great guy, and was a great friend, and obviously he went on to do great things too. And it's just, I guess throughout my career I've been fortunate to know a lot of guys that have succeeded, and actually that's what it's all about.
I know you also have some pretty interesting stories with Buzz. What's putting rats in tailpipes? What was that about?
Oh, well, the F-86, we tried to soup them up and ran them as hot as we could, the engines, because you get more thrust that way. And we put rats in the tailpipe, which those are pieces of metal about like that, and it just narrows the circumference and diameter of the tailpipe and makes the air come out hotter and gives you more thrust.
Oh, wow.
So everybody was doing that, and
just getting that extra
the
power.
fastest airplane, and we had them.
Now, you were also Buzz's flight commander at one point?
Well, yeah. When we first got to Korea, he and I went all the way through flying school together, basic, advanced, and gunnery school, and then went to Korea together. And when we got there, they made me a flight commander and put Buzz under me.
Oh, wow.
He didn't like that.
But he still honored you and looked up to you, right? Did he wear your POW bracelet when he went to the moon?
Yes, he did. And Buzz and I are still friends and talk to each other occasionally, even now.
I actually listened to your book, and I remember one part where you talked about, he said he was looking down at Southeast Asia when he was coming back, and he was just thinking about you.
Yeah, that was when I was in prison camp over there.
Yeah, so, I mean, that had to be kind of pretty special to see that in the book, or his book, right? When he wrote that note for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You also had a MiG kill in Korea, correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that went down?
Well, I shot at a lot of them. I had a kill, a probable, and a damage, but the kill was on the Yalu River, and I caught him down low and got him from behind, and he didn't have a chance.
He probably didn't have a chance because of the name of the plane you were flying, correct?
Well, that may be true, but being able to shoot at an airplane and make it go down is kind of thrills.
Not only that, but you're flying Shirley's Texas Tornado.
Yes, that's the name I had painted on the side of the airplane, and that was my wife.
You were close to running out of gas at the same time?
No, I did on the way home. I climbed 40,000 feet and had about 50 pounds left, which is nothing, and I shut the engine down and glided for about 80 miles back to Kimpo, which is the airfield north of us, and started the engine up and landed and taxied into the gas pump and flamed out. They filled it back up, and I took the airplane back home.
Did you get in trouble for that?
No, because I shot down a MiG.
There you go, right? As long as you do something good. Right? That's awesome. So after the Korean War, you became a Thunderbird pilot. What positions do you fly? What plane?
I flew solo and slot. I flew solo for a year and then moved into slot when the slot man retired, and flew that for a year. that was we flew all over the United States, probably in nearly every air base in the country, and went to South America twice.
And you have an interesting story about how you would open up those air shows, correct?
Well, when I was flying solo, I used to open the show with a sonic boom, faster than the speed of sound, and until we did a show in Mississippi, right on the river down there, or near the coast, and it was on the coast, I guess, and I broke every window on the waterfront, and cost the Air Force about $100,000, and they said, "Don't do that anymore."
No more sonic booms. So were those building windows?
You got to be careful about how you could do a sonic boom, but you had to be careful about how you did it, and because we used to open the air show with a sonic boom.
Catch everyone's attention.
Yeah. I think more fun than anything was flying in New York City, and I turned on the smoke and flew a circle around the Empire State Building at the observation deck level, and they said, "Don't do that anymore either."
So you have to do a lot of things, huh?
Well, you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And I think we got a great Air Force. Our Air Force is probably the best in the world. I think it's going to stay that way.
Sounds like you had a really good time doing the Thunderbirds.
Oh, listen, that was a great tour. It was good duty, and I think we did a good job for the Air Force, and it was a recruiting tool, obviously, for the Air Force, and it worked.
Did you write some manuals while you were with the Thunderbirds? Did you write flying manuals?
Well, I did that when I was at Nellis in training analysis and development. That's where I was based, and John Boyd, who was in R&D in Fighter Weapons School, he and I got together and wrote the training gunnery manual that is still in effect today.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, I heard you were involved with preparations for an attack?
Oh, well, I was at Nellis, of course, at the time, and they sent me down there to help form the Air Force response to the Cuban crisis. The Russians had missiles set up on a mountain down there facing the United States, and you could actually see it from our side, but because I was involved in that, we had nearly every fighter in the Air Force down there for that. We were going to blow Cuba off the map if they did anything, and I decided, they wanted me to go down there and take care of one of the bases in Cuba when we went in, and so to do that, they were going to jump us in, and so I went through jump school, parachute training, and when I got out of jump school, they let us pick airplanes. We picked 5 airplanes that we were going to take down there and take over an air base in eastern Cuba, and it was 50, 60 miles east of Havana.
Oh, okay.
And they were going to jump an Army battalion in there and jump us in to run the Air Force from there. So we trained for that, and they let me pick an airplane out, and actually I went through jump school at Fort Bragg because of that, because we were going to jump in. And we were in Florida at the time, just waiting for the...
Now, could you see something Russian from Florida? Is that what I understand? You were seeing Russian guns on the hill?
Oh, yeah. You could see them on the hill down there pointing at us. And they were on a hill and it was kind of.
Give you that sense of anxiety, or
Sir?
give you that sense of realness that they're right there.
They're there, yeah. All they had to do was, well, they were nuclear tipped missiles that they were aimed right at Florida, and we had every airplane in the Air Force down there practically, and we wiped out Nellis Air Force Base, which is where I was based actually, and we sent all our airplanes down there and had them all loaded with nuclear bombs. It was a tense situation, to say the least, and of course the Russians backed down when they saw what we were doing, and but I had been to Cuba before that event, and you know, we had a lot of fun down there then, but we were going to fly, drop, parachute in and take over an air base in southeast Cuba, and we were going to land a bunch of fighters down there, and I was going to run on base.
So talking about nukes, I heard you had some interesting tests for the Air Force that involved nukes.
Oh yeah, I've seen them 5 different nuclear blasts, and flew through one of them, and an airburst that just to test the airplane to see what effect it had on it. And you know, people said, "Why'd you do that?" That didn't seem scary to me. It's just another cloud. And but when I landed back at Nellis, they parked me out in the South 40 and came up with, told me not to get out of the airplane. They came up with 4 fire trucks and sprayed the airplane down, and then I could get out of it. But
decon.
I've seen a lot that guys haven't had a chance to be involved in, but I've seen 4 nuclear explosions out there in the test site.
Now, did you get to watch one with your wife as well?
Yeah, I watched one of them from Mount Charleston, which we had a R&R camp up on top of the hill. It's about 5 miles away, and I had no idea they were going to do that test at that point, but they did, and we watched it.
So you're there on R&R, and then next thing you know, a nuke's going off. That's different times. You've done and seen a lot. Is there anything you weren't supposed to that you've seen? Or
well, SR-71, I saw the first one take off out of Indian Springs Air Force Base, and you weren't supposed to know that it was there or see it. And they made me land there and swore me to secrecy. And
where were you stationed during your time in the Air Force?
Well, mostly at Nellis. You know, I went through flying school in Bartow, Florida, and Bryan Air Force Base, Texas, and Nellis Air Force Base, and then Korea. So I was in those places, but spent most of my time after that at Nellis and training analysis and development. I was running it, and John Boyd was in fighter weapons school running TR&D there, and the two of us got together and wrote a couple of manuals, and you know, experimented with a few bombs.
So you were also in Homestead. Where was that?
Homestead's Miami.
It's Miami. So did you experience
south of Miami, actually.
You had a little experience on the runway there?
Well, what do you mean?
Some lobsters, or?
Well, we had a deployment up in, where was it? Massachusetts, I guess, and we kept 2 airplanes on alert up there all the time from Homestead, and so I found out that we could get lobsters up there, and haul them back on our C-130 that came back with a change of crews, and our guys would meet them at the airplane and get their lobsters. That was neat. Except that the C-130 crashed on a runway before takeoff, and all the lobsters were scattered all over the damn runway.
Wow.
I never heard the end of that. But we scraped them all up, got the runway cleared up, and I figured out we could put them in a 600-gallon tank and bring them back to the homestead, so we kept doing it. They wouldn't put them on a C-130 anymore.
Sounds like some good eating, sir.
That is. And those Maine lobsters are great.
So over nearly 3 decades in the Air Force, what were your favorite planes to fly, and why did you like them?
Oh, gee, well, I liked the F-86, obviously. And I flew the P-51 a couple of times. I loved that airplane. And I liked the F-100 and the 105 and the F-15 and the F-16. I've flown all those, and that's good, clean fun.
Do you like any of these new planes that have come around, like
sure.
the 22 or the 35?
Yeah.
Have you got to see any up close?
Sir?
Have you got to see any up close?
The F-35? Yeah, I've been close to a couple of them, but I like that airplane. I think it's a good airplane. And it's got range. Fighters didn't have much range early on, and they've kind of changed that now. You can put extra tanks on them and damn near fly them anywhere you want to today.
Yeah. I know that you got to be the commander at a couple bases too, right? How was that being the commander?
Where?
You got to be the wing commander at a couple bases?
Oh, yeah. Holloman, for starters. That was probably one of the best experiences I've had, because we did a lot of testing out there. And the weather was always good, so you could do a lot of flying.
Sir, I really have no other questions for you. I really thank you for taking this time, for spending this time with me and talking a little bit about your career and where you've been. If you don't mind, what are some of the things that you've done in office that have helped the Air Force?
Well, we're trying to keep it afloat, People want to cut the Air Force to nothing, and I think I've been helpful in keeping it going and procuring new aircraft and modernizing the fleet, which we're still doing, as you know. People think bombers are the only answer to flying, and that's not true. It's hard to keep them focused on the fact that you need fighters to support them. And I don't know where we're going now. Maybe you could tell me.
Yeah, everything's always changing. How is it seeing, when you first joined the Air Force had been around for maybe 3 years. How is it seeing it now?
Well, it's a big change, mainly in the equipment, but we've got more bases scattered around, too, that make it a stronger force, too, I think. And our capability to go long distance, in other words, we can go from here to Asia or here to Europe nonstop with air refueling, and so I think the United States is a force to be reckoned with, and people need to know that when it comes to protecting freedom and the things that we adhere to, we're going to do it.
All right, sir. That's all I got. I mean, if you have anything else.
Listen, I love the Air Force, and it's a great outfit, and keep them flying.
Roger that, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
The Air Force Podcast.